So it's my pleasure to welcome Amy Dresser. For the past 11 years, she's been based in Los Angeles, amassing an array of commercial and editorial work as a photo retoucher and illustrator, as successful business owner, and master creator of what has come to be known in the industry as the Amy Dresser technique. She's celebrated for her portrait work, and more specifically, her treatment of skin, and you'll see some amazing examples. She studied fine art and painting and worked as an illustrator and has had an amazing number of clients. She's done album artwork for Britney Spears, editorial work for many magazines, including Entertainment Weekly, Maxim, Time, TV Guide. She's done advertising campaigns for Pepsi, Sony, Target, Taco Bell, and many others. And she's done retouched many celebrity portraits. Now, you might think that these celebrities are very good-looking. Well, they weren't before she got to them. She's done pictures of Tom Cruise, Ryan Gosling, Hilary Swank, Nicole Kidman, Gwen Stefani. The list goes on and on. I'm sure you have seen her work, but without ever knowing that it was her work. And I think that is really the sign of a great retoucher. So please join me in welcoming Amy Dresser.
Hi, my name's Amy Dresser, and I fix things. I make things better than they were before. I can change the weather. I can move buildings. I can make people disappear. And I can make fairies appear where they're not supposed to. I can make things explode, too. But I don't know magic, and just to clarify, I'm also not God. Well, I'm God, but that's not why I do these things. But I'm a photo retoucher. And I can dedicate up to 50 hours working on one image alone. But when I'm done with it, it's not actually considered my image still. And that's because I'm providing a service. I'm not actually ever going to be the author of the images I work on. And so I compare myself sort of to like someone who's mixing vocals for a singer, or maybe that dude that did underpainting for Rembrandt. But more I think about it, I wonder, isn't the photographer the underpainter? So I think, oops, I might be the Rembrandt. So digital touching allows us to do exactly what we could do with analog retouching, but with more efficiency, a lot more precision, less traces and artifacts, and more importantly, we can actually change our mind. Nothing is permanent, and we can do multiple versions of one kind of image. So as a student, I actually was very anti-computers, and I was very disciplined, and I was trying to resist the idea of editing my work, and I really wanted to be able to just live with my mistakes and imperfections. But now I have a career that holds extremely tight hands with the idea of perfection. Instead of me being able to be that expressionist painting student, I now work in advertising where they have no room for expressionism at all. We still use photo retouching for advertising for some of the same reasons we would in other forms of art, mainly aesthetic reasons, albeit a much narrower range, and to communicate something, even though it's a much shallower range, because essentially my curator is like a company that sells jelly or oatmeal cookies. So I'm going to start actually showing real slides now. Photographs are often considered as proof of fact or documentation of a moment, but regularly I actually defact them, and I create false moments that never happened. My job is to help photographers and advertisers gently lie to basically anyone who has working eyeballs. But it's for a good reason. We're easily distracted. Magazine pages and advertisements are only viewed for a few seconds, and so one of the major roles in commercial retouching is to actually take away these distractions. So if somebody's actually looking at the ad or a magazine page, they're looking at what they're supposed to look at, And not things like the lipstick on this woman's tooth, how tired this woman looks, zits. This bracelet is just too flashy. While we're down here, we don't want her hair either on her arms. We don't like her hair either. And is that a nicotine patch? I don't know what is wrong with that man's foot. And they decide maybe this guy, he doesn't drink white wine. And one of the ones that I retain in my memory is the people who are a little concerned about this baby showing one half of one nipple. So commercial retouching started with very practical intentions like this, just to fix up small things to make an image, get up to par. Good retouching was supposed to go completely unnoticed, but that time has died. Retouching is no longer a secret, and everybody knows about Photoshop, and some kids are using Photoshop before some adults are. So instead of being used for insurance, there we go. Photographers are now using us kind of like steroids. Instead of fixing things, I'm now allowed to enhance things, tell a bigger story, tell an impossible story, to blur the boundary between fiction and reality, and maybe the line between a photograph and a painting. And on some images, I'm only required to have a light influence. And other ones, my clients are okay with me having a much heavier one. So, like with any new technology, some of us mourn the lack of those traces and those artifacts, that point of origin, and they were endeared by those things, and instead they're left with something that's a little maybe too perfect and sterile. And since art school, I have fully embraced computers, but I still have at least one pinky stuck in Expressionism. So my main philosophy in retouching is to actually not make things look perfect. I'm not talking about leaving one prize zit on someone's nose, but I am still looking to maybe fool the viewer and to pay attention to a little bit of the raw and not just the gloss. And so you can see that I keep a lot of pores, a lot of the hair, a lot of the skin texture. It only really has to look perfect kind of at a glance, not so someone is like, oh, what's up with that? And then the more you look at it, you can see that it does have all the information. It's not just a non-human anymore. And so I like to retain the character if I can, and I avoid total perfection, and I like information over lack of information. And so I believe, since I have a job where I'm kind of required to lie to people, I like to keep my lies a little bit on the gentle side, and if I'm going to make a lie, I try to have it be a detailed lie. So one of the ways I can get away with keeping skin looking near perfect without actually getting rid of texture is working with skin color. If I can make someone's skin more uniform in color, tone, and saturation, it can go a long way in it can go a long way in covering up the kinds of things that some retouchers are very tempted to just erase. And it also, because I have a painting background, I'm not loyal to, I don't really believe in color correction, and I'll make someone's skin color however I think it just marries itself with the whole image. And a bunch of these you'll see that I do make the skin darker, and the opposite of the old techniques of blowing out a Hollywood film star to get rid of all her wrinkles. This way I can actually show more wrinkles, more pores. I can show this kid's freckles more, and the highlights show up more too, and I paint those myself on top of the highlights that's already on the image. And it's a little bit of a hobby for me. So while I'm not totally obsessed with tans, I will admit that I went a little too far with this guy. And then this is an example I did just so you could see that not everybody looks good with a tan. And so I have an example here of a guy who I was asked to give him a little bit more sun. And then if I don't look what I'm doing, I'll sometimes go a little bit too far and change somebody's race. So I had to scale him back. And then the photographer was curious about the concept of changing someone's race, and he wanted to do this project where he wanted to call it All Look Same. And this was the test picture where I tried to take his assistant and make her look Chinese. And this is without using any other frames. This is all just Photoshop in this one image. So a little bit about my skin process. I can make someone's skin better. I can change the color, and I can influence the mood, but that's it. That's kind of where the line is drawn. Sometimes with those three things, it's just a very subtle difference. And then sometimes I kind of hijack the image. Most people don't mind. Some people do. But I'm not ever trying to hijack an image on purpose. Usually I'm using the base picture as an inspiration for what I think the image could be. And so when I see this, I'm like, all right, I get it. We want it to look gold. Like, just make it gold. So I have an example here of an image from start to finish. Typically, an image like this would take me about 2 hours to do, which is extremely boring to watch. I'm going to try to break it down into like a minute, which will still be kind of boring because I retouch in a little bit of a touchy-feely, hippie way, and nothing is that dramatic step for step. So this is the raw image. This is what came out of the camera. And I do like a global color adjustment just to sort of point it in a creative direction to get me going. And then I take away some of the no-brainer stuff. And then the next few steps are just, I look for the most distracting thing, and I deal with it, whether it be a bump or a patch of skin that's a little bit pink or green or a dark or light spot. And I take care of each one, adding a little bit of sheen all the while. And then at the end, I do a little playing around with deeper mood. Here's the beginning, and here's the finished. So I have a few different examples of how I can influence mood on an image. It's always done on top. I'm in a commercial world, so I get outvoted sometimes. It's the only part that I can be creative with, but because I'm collaborating with other people, I have to make sure I can take it off in case somebody's idea is going to squash mine. I'm very lucky to have a lot of clients who just trust my ideas. And some people feel like they have to give me an agenda, but the ones that say, like, just do what you feel like doing, those are fun for both of us, usually. So when I do get feedback from my clients, it usually falls into 3 categories. One of them is this, I go along with whatever they want me to fix because I essentially agree with them. Sometimes I do what they want because I want them to see that it's maybe a bad idea, and I'm better at showing than arguing. And then the third category is where I try to just gently disguise whatever they're deciding is a problem. And to do that, I use a lot of illusions. So instead of making this girl actually thinner, which I wasn't supposed to do anyways because she's a plus-size model, I make her skin look better, and I even out her skin tone. And with shading, I can just make this like a better picture of her without the idea of trying to actually make her look thin. So I'll just turn fat into muscle. I'll give people better skin. Like, those are the same kind of techniques that people were using before Photoshop. I did tuck her stomach in a little bit, but it's all shading. And I'm using mostly just dodge and burn tools, which are carried over from the old darkroom techniques. And so exposing areas to more light would make it darker. burning, and then the dodge would to make areas lighter. So I'm keeping the color information, I'm keeping the actual image of the girl, but I'm actually pushing and pulling the light to just make some things fall into shadow, or some things come closer to the viewer in the case of bones or muscles. And also with dodging and burning, I can smooth out skin, I can carve out definition, and I can sort of change a little bit more of the drama in the whole image. And because I do this so much on bodies, naturally, see, I can make her legs look stronger. I can give cleavage. And a face is the same as any other body part. It's bones, muscle, flesh, and so I can essentially carve muscles and in the face to show a slightly more severe expression. These kinds of things are my favorite thing to do because essentially I'm a portrait girl, and I would love to just retouch people all day long, especially this kind of thing because this was such a fun project to work on. But I also like retouching athletes because I get to do those same things. I get to celebrate somebody's shape that they worked for. I don't have to get pressured into making them skinnier. I can make them sweat. I can make them look like superheroes. And in some cases, the art director asked me to make them look like God. And in some cases, the art director asked me to hide their genitals from showing through their wetsuit. I'm not going to show you that slide. So while some retouchers are using Photoshop to make real people look kind of fake, other people are using Photoshop to make fake things look real. So it's not so much about polishing an image, but assembling a series of images to create one image that wasn't captured in one moment or one frame. This is a silly example. So we call it compositing. Obviously, this couldn't happen in real life, and if it did, I might need to move planets. So sometimes there's simple applications where we're just swapping a head. We're boosting up hair for a hair product. We're putting in a background. We can light the subject one way and the background another and combine them together. We can combine body parts to make a more classic pose. We can make an animal actor be a little bit more perfect than he was on set, including this little butterfly. And instead of hiring twins and doing expensive upholstery. And then we can also take some frames and just expose it in a few different ways to get sort of the best of every part of it. We can make more space than there ever was, dancing jeans. And then you can shoot a place that you didn't have a permit for, shoot someone in the studio, and you can just add them in and then make them match. You can make things float, levitate, shine. I had to do this for several secret products. Here's a breakdown of one of them layer by layer. Not layer by layer, but I try to show you just steps that go in the process of building it. Now I told you that there was going to be fairies. They're coming up. Ding! There they are. And those things that explode that aren't really going to be as pretty as you think they will if you do try to capture it. Also not very safe for this girl. And again, you don't have to deal with shooting on a location. And you can just make the concept a little bit more ideal and prettier than it was in your imagination. Here's another breakdown of a composite image. This one is shot specifically for the end product, which is always a treat, especially when someone knows what they're doing on location or on a set. So I get to retouch these individual swimmers in separate files and then combine them in this scene that they were shot on, so it's not going to be as much of a stretch as some other things. Not all things are shot this great, so I do have to do a lot of handiwork sometimes and rescue a job. I get a lot of weird phone calls that are like, we have this image, see what you can do by daylight, money's no object. And so I'm feeling like I'm cleaning up some like dead bodies in advertising job closets. And there's a number of reasons that this, like tons of reasons things can go wrong. I'm like at the end of the process in a creative process. I'm not in casting, I'm not doing the makeup, but I can be correcting things that are done in every stage. I can be correcting makeup mistakes, hair mistakes, lighting mistakes, just messy set things. In this case, this image was blown out, and it was a whole set of 25 of them that I had to do. Maybe they want to do a makeup treatment that wasn't thought of before. Something's shot at the end of the day, and there's hardly any light to make it a sunny, Teletubby-esque looking image. And they added a yellow thing to her face to try to make her look sunny, but it didn't really work out. Then a pearly pink gel to really ruin a picture. Sometimes the hairdresser runs out of ideas in a bad way. She's too old, and he's not old enough. And sometimes a product is changed after it's shot. And in this case, the newer version of this wetsuit was worn in a race, and then he broke a record, and they definitely wanted the newer version to be depicted in the image. But that required me to change the nature of a fabric, make it shinier, and make it look like water was not absorbing into it. Nobody really looks like a pinup girl. And sometimes a fitness model is just too intimidating for the target market, and I'm asked to make her look softer and like she has hips. And while we're there, can you make her a little prettier and have bigger boobs? I'm trying to hit for it. There we go. Katy Perry. We can't keep up with what color hair her hair is. And then she's also expensive to get on a shoot, so I'm just given a bunch of red carpet images, and I have to take that dress and put it with those shoulders and those legs and shoes, with that face and that hairdo, to make her Frankenstein style. So this is the last image I'm going to talk about. This is a composite that I made it was a collaboration between a matte painter, a CG artist, and a photographer, and myself. And the CG artist thought it was a good idea if I had to deal with the mains that they were supposed to take care of, where I thought it was their job. And so I find a lot of people have a lot more faith in me than I do, or they're just sort of getting away with doing work that they don't want to do, or making me do work they don't want to do. So while some of my clients think I actually do know magic, it's really dangerous because there's a huge difference between me doing that and me crying in my pajamas at 6 in the morning because I haven't figured out how to do it. So digital manipulation is supposed to make life easier for some people, but there's some people who found a way to make my life harder. And while it's hard to be an expressionist in the era of Command Z, I think it's totally possible to give Weird Al's horse Weird Al hair. So because of that alone, I think I can get over it. Should I go over here?